My wife was unfaithful for an entire year, and when I discovered it, she expected me to treat it like it was no big deal, so I decided to get even. My name is Daniel. I am 38, and I work as a civil engineer for a mid-sized infrastructure firm in Munich. My schedule is steady but demanding, mostly early mornings on site and paperwork in the evenings. I like structure and routine, and I have always earned well enough for a comfortable life without being extravagant. My wife is Laura. She is 36 and works as a senior account manager for a pharmaceutical sales company. We have been married for 9 years and together for 12. We own an apartment near the Isar and split the mortgage. No kids, but we share a dog and most of our finances. Up until last year, I would have described our marriage as functional with occasional friction. Laura has always had a sharp tongue. She prides herself on being blunt and calls it honesty. I used to interpret it as stress from her job. Sales targets, regional travel, constant meetings with hospital administrators. I work with contractors who shout for a living, so I am not fragile about tone. Looking back, the first shift was subtle. She became guarded with her phone. That by itself is not proof of anything. People deserve privacy. What caught my attention was the way she started treating me like an inconvenience in my own home. Small digs about how I dressed. Comments about my routine being boring. Rolling her eyes when I talked about work. It was not explosive. It was steady erosion. Around that same time, she began traveling more often. Conferences in Berlin. Training sessions in Frankfurt. Dinners with clients that ran late. I checked. The conferences existed. The company held the training she mentioned. I am methodical by nature. When she said she would be at a hotel near the airport for a sales summit, there was in fact a summit booked there. I did not jump to conclusions. The turning point was not a dramatic discovery. It was a pattern that refused to make sense. Expenses that did not align with the trips she claimed to take. Gaps in her location history that she forgot to disable. And a level of contempt toward me that felt rehearsed, like she needed to convince herself I deserved it. I did not confront her immediately. I gathered information. And what I found over the next few weeks forced me to see my marriage very differently. What made me uneasy was not a single message or a lipstick stain. It was logistics. I handle multi-million-euro construction budgets. Inconsistencies stand out to me the way cracks stand out in concrete. Laura started expensing things to our joint card that her company should have covered. Boutique hotels when she claimed she was staying at conference venues. Restaurant bills for 2 people in cities where she insisted she was dining with a larger group. When I asked casually, she would snap that I was micromanaging her. One night, she came back from what she said was a cardiology sales summit in Berlin. She was distant, almost irritated that I was awake when she arrived. I asked how the event went. She shrugged and said boring. Same faces, same fake networking. The problem was I had looked up the event schedule earlier that week. It had been a 2-day workshop, not a 4-day conference like she told me. I did not accuse her. I asked for the program out of curiosity, saying I might recommend the hotel chain for an upcoming project meeting. She rolled her eyes and said I was being weird. Then she said she threw the brochure away. That response was more telling than anything. Laura has always been organized about work materials. She keeps digital copies of everything. Suddenly, she had nothing. Her attitude toward me also escalated. She started comparing me to her colleagues' husbands. Apparently, they were more ambitious, more spontaneous, more fun. She said I was predictable. She said it like it was a character flaw. Predictable is not a crime. It pays the mortgage. The contempt felt strategic. Like she was building a narrative where I was the dull husband who deserved to be sidelined. I have seen contractors do something similar before terminating a partnership. They create a story that justifies the exit. So I stopped asking emotional questions and started verifying facts. Quietly, I checked hotel bookings through our credit card statements. I cross-referenced dates with public conference listings. I even called one venue pretending to inquire about hosting an engineering seminar, just to confirm whether her company had reserved blocks of rooms. They had not. That was the first concrete contradiction I could not explain away. After the venue call, I shifted from suspicion to confirmation mode. I still said nothing to Laura. If she was lying, confronting her without leverage would only push her to hide it better. The next opportunity came 2 weeks later. She told me she had a 3-day training in Frankfurt. I offered to drive her to the airport since I had a site inspection nearby that morning. She declined immediately. Too early, she said. She would just take a taxi. That answer alone was not incriminating. But when I checked our joint card later, there was no taxi charge. Instead, There was a parking garage fee near Munich Central Station. I work 5 minutes from that station. On the second day of her supposed training, I adjusted my schedule. I told my team I would be reviewing plans remotely. Around noon, I walked past the parking garage listed on the charge. Her car was there. At that point, I still did not assume an affair. There are many ways to lie that do not involve another person. But she was clearly not in Frankfurt. I waited in a cafe across the street for almost 3 hours. I did not storm the garage. I did not call her. I wanted to see what she would do when she thought she was unobserved. Around 3 in the afternoon, she walked out of the station entrance with a man I had never seen before. They were not colleagues keeping polite distance. They were walking close, shoulder to shoulder, her hand lightly on his arm. It was casual in the way that suggests repetition. They did not see me. I stayed seated. They crossed the street and got into her car together. That moment was clean. No ambiguity. No need for interpretation. She was not at training. She was not networking. She was meeting him in my city during work hours while telling me she was in another state. I did not follow them. I did not create a scene. I took photos from a distance, clear enough to identify both of them and the license plate. Then I went back to my office and finished my reports. That night, she came home around 8. She complained about how exhausting the training was and how the hotel food was terrible. I listened. I nodded. I asked neutral questions about Frankfurt traffic. She answered easily. That was when I understood something important. This was not a one-time mistake. It required planning, coordination, confidence. And the way she spoke to me that night, almost annoyed that I existed, made it clear she did not think I would ever find out. Over the next month, I confirmed the pattern without escalating it. I did not need to know every detail. I needed to know duration and scope. I checked our phone bill. There was a number she contacted daily, sometimes for over an hour at a time. Late at night, when she claimed to be reviewing sales reports. Early mornings when she said she was preparing for meetings. The number was registered to a small consulting firm in Munich. I looked it up. The man I had seen at the station was listed as a partner there. That removed any lingering doubt. What bothered me more than the physical betrayal was her behavior at home. She became openly dismissive. If I asked about dinner plans, she would sigh like I was a burden. If I suggested a weekend hike, she would say she needed something more stimulating than forests and spreadsheets. One evening she told me I lacked drive, that I was too comfortable. She said it while sitting on a sofa I paid for, in an apartment where my income covered most of the mortgage. I am not insecure about my career. Civil engineering is not glamorous, but it is stable and essential. I build things that remain standing. I do not need applause for that. Her tone, though, shifted from irritated to almost hostile. It was as if she needed to downgrade me to justify what she was doing. People rarely cheat in a vacuum. They build narratives to make themselves the protagonist instead of the aggressor. By the 3rd month of quiet observation, I knew the affair had been going on for at least a year. I confirmed hotel bookings in Munich under her name on nights she claimed to be at late client dinners. I found duplicate calendar entries she forgot to delete. At that point, I had enough evidence to confront her and end it cleanly. I could have printed everything and placed it on the kitchen table. But what stopped me was not fear. It was her attitude. When I finally asked her directly if she was seeing someone else, she did not panic. She did not deny it convincingly. She looked at me with irritation and said, "Even if I was, what would you do about it?" That was the moment the situation changed for me. When she said, "What would you do about it?" she was leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, like we were debating vacation plans. There was no guilt, no hesitation, just annoyance that I had interrupted whatever version of our marriage she had constructed in her head. I did not raise my voice. I told her I already knew about the man from the consulting firm. I told her I had seen them together. I mentioned the Frankfurt trip and the parking garage. Her expression changed, but not to remorse. It shifted to irritation that I had been thorough. She said I was being dramatic, that it was not as serious as I thought, that it had been going on for a while, but it did not mean anything. A year does not qualify as nothing in my definition. Then she said something that clarified everything. She said I was stable and safe, and he was exciting. As if those were complementary categories she was entitled to balance. That was when I ended the discussion. The apartment is legally in my name. I purchased it 2 years before we married. We refinanced together later, but ownership remained mine. I confirmed that detail with a lawyer the week before I confronted her. I do not make major moves without understanding the framework. I told her she needed to pack essentials and leave that night. I would give her access to collect the rest of her belongings later with notice. She laughed at first. She thought I was posturing. I walked to the bedroom, brought out a suitcase, and set it on the floor. I told her calmly that I would not share a home with someone who had been lying to me for a year and then minimized it. I said she could stay with her consultant or a friend, but not here. She switched from dismissive to angry quickly. She called me controlling. She said I was overreacting. She said adults have complicated lives. I repeated the same sentence. You are not staying here tonight. Within 40 minutes, she was throwing clothes into the suitcase, slamming drawers, muttering that I would regret this. I did not argue. I stood in the doorway and made sure she took what she needed for a week. When she left, I locked the door and changed the access code to the building garage immediately. There was no dramatic speech. Just a boundary enforced the same day it was crossed openly. The first thing I did after she left was sit down and document everything. Not out of revenge. Out of clarity. Dates, screenshots, photos, credit card statements. I emailed copies to a private account and saved them to an external drive. If this moved toward divorce, I wanted a clean timeline. Then I blocked her. Phone first, then messaging apps, then social media. I did not do it impulsively. I did it because I know how Laura operates. When she feels control slipping, she escalates. Not emotionally, but rhetorically. She reframes. She debates until reality feels negotiable. Within an hour of leaving, she had already sent a string of texts. They moved quickly from anger to condescension. She said I was acting insecure. She said long-term marriages survive worse. She said I was throwing away stability over something physical. That word stood out. Physical. As if 12 months of deception could be reduced to a category. I did not respond. I blocked her number mid-paragraph. Then I logged into our shared accounts and separated them. I removed her access from the joint savings. I did not drain it. I transferred half to her personal account and left a clear digital trail. Fair division. No theatrics. I changed the Wi-Fi password. I deactivated her garage remote. I informed the building management that only I had authorization to modify access permissions. All legal. All documented. Around midnight, she tried calling from a different number. I recognized the consultant firm's office line. I declined it and blocked that too. The next morning, she showed up at the apartment building. I saw her through the intercom camera. She rang repeatedly. I did not answer. Instead, I sent a single email from a new address she was not blocked on. The email was brief. Communication will go through lawyers from now on. Do not come to the apartment without written notice. She responded within minutes. She said I was being cold and vindictive. She said she thought I was more rational than this. The irony did not escape me. Blocking her was not about punishing her. It was about preventing her from reshaping the narrative into something softer. I had clarity once. I was not going to let it blur. For 3 days, there was silence. Not because she accepted it, but because she was recalibrating. On the 4th day, her tone shifted. She sent a formal email instead of emotional messages. She said we needed to discuss practical matters like the dog, the furniture, and upcoming mortgage payments. The email was structured, almost professional. It was the first time she acknowledged the situation without minimizing it. I replied once. I told her the dog would stay with me. My work schedule is consistent and I am home most evenings. Her travel pattern, legitimate or not, is unpredictable. I attached veterinary registration documents showing I was the primary contact. As for the apartment, I made it clear I was not asking her to leave with nothing. I proposed a financial settlement equal to her contributions toward renovations over the years, documented with bank transfers. I was not interested in dragging this through court for pride. Her response came quickly, and the edge returned. She wrote that I was punishing her for being honest about her needs. She reframed the affair as a symptom of marital stagnation. She said I had emotionally checked out long before she did anything physical. That word again. Physical. As if that was the only metric. What struck me was the lack of accountability. At no point did she say it was wrong. She said it was complicated. She said adults evolve. She said monogamy is not always realistic in modern professional circles. That last sentence told me more about her environment than about us. Later that evening, a mutual friend called me. He said Laura had told people that I had overreacted and thrown her out over a short-term mistake. She apparently left out the year-long timeline. I did not correct him angrily. I sent him 2 screenshots with timestamps. Nothing explicit, just dates spanning 12 months. He went quiet. This was the part she did not anticipate. That I would stay calm and factual. No shouting. No public scenes. Just verifiable information. By the end of the week, she stopped framing it as nothing. Instead, she started suggesting therapy. Not to reconcile, but to process. She said we owed it to our history. I declined. Therapy is for problems people want to solve. She had already solved hers by outsourcing excitement. I had solved mine by removing her from my home. The only remaining question was how to finalize it without letting her reshape the ending. I filed for divorce the following Monday. In Germany, separation can be formalized even before the year-long waiting period is complete, as long as both parties acknowledge the breakdown. My lawyer advised that the documentation I had gathered would prevent unnecessary disputes about assets or fault. I was not seeking revenge through the court. I was seeking closure without negotiation fatigue. Laura did not expect me to move that quickly. She called from a new number the day she was served. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was controlled but irritated. She said involving lawyers made things hostile. She said we could have handled this privately. We could have, if she had approached it privately when she started seeing someone else. That afternoon, she sent another email. The tone had shifted again. She said the consultant was not serious. She implied that the affair had run its course and that I was dismantling a stable marriage over something temporary. That was the first time she admitted it had ended. So now I had clarity on two fronts. She cheated for a year, and when confronted, she assumed she could recalibrate and return if it suited her. I responded once more, briefly. I said this is not about whether he is serious. It is about the fact that you were. After that, I stopped replying entirely and directed everything to my lawyer. Meanwhile, I adjusted my own routine. I informed my bank about the separation. I updated beneficiary information on my insurance. I changed emergency contacts at work. Practical steps that make emotional decisions concrete. Friends began choosing sides quietly. Some reached out to her first. Some to me. I did not campaign for support. I answered questions factually if asked. I did not embellish. Laura, however, continued shaping her version. According to her, I was rigid, unforgiving, incapable of growth. It was almost clinical, the way she framed my refusal as immaturity. The irony is that immaturity would have been staying and negotiating my own standards down. 2 weeks into the process, she asked for one in-person conversation to clear the air. Not to reconcile, she said, just to end things respectfully. I agreed to meet her in a public cafe near her temporary apartment. Not because I needed closure, because I wanted to hear what accountability sounded like when there was no more leverage left. We met on a Thursday afternoon. Neutral territory. Busy enough that neither of us would escalate. She arrived 10 minutes late, dressed carefully, like this was a negotiation rather than the end of a marriage. She started with composure. She said she wanted to acknowledge that she handled things poorly. Not wrong. Poorly. She said she should have communicated her dissatisfaction earlier. I let her speak. She described feeling restless for years. She said my routine, my predictability, made her feel invisible. She said the consultant made her feel seen, energized, like she was not just someone's stable wife. I asked one question. If you felt that way for years, why not leave before starting something else? She hesitated. Then she said she did not want to lose the life we built. The apartment, the financial security, the reputation of being married to someone dependable. That was the closest she came to honesty. What became clear in that cafe was that she did not view the affair as a betrayal of me. She viewed it as an enhancement of herself, a supplement, something she believed she could integrate without dismantling the structure I maintained. She then asked whether there was any version of this where we paused the divorce and reassess in 6 months. She said people make mistakes. She said long-term partnerships require flexibility. I told her this was not about flexibility. It was about alignment. I can accept conflict. I can accept boredom phases. I cannot accept parallel relationships sustained through deception. She tried one more angle. She said I was acting out of pride, that I was punishing her because my ego was bruised. That was the only moment I felt irritation. I explained calmly that ego would have been confronting her publicly, or contacting the consultant's clients, or humiliating her socially. Instead, I asked her to leave a property that legally belongs to me and filed for divorce through proper channels. There is a difference between pride and standards. When the coffee cups were empty, I stood up first. I told her I wished her clarity in whatever she wanted next, but it would not involve me. She did not argue further. As I walked back to my car, I realized something simple. She expected me to treat a year of deception as a negotiable inconvenience. Instead, I treated it as final data. The divorce moved forward without spectacle. Because I had documented everything and separated finances early, there was little to contest. She attempted once more to negotiate a larger settlement, arguing that emotional distress should factor into compensation. My lawyer responded with numbers, not feelings. The final agreement reflected documented contributions and nothing beyond that. We did not drag it out for a year. The formal separation period passed quietly. She moved into a smaller flat on the other side of the city. The consultant, from what I heard through mutual acquaintances, was not interested in long-term commitments. That part did not surprise me. What did surprise me was how quickly my daily life stabilized. I expected anger, or at least prolonged resentment. Instead, what I felt was efficiency. My home was calm. No undercurrent of contempt. No subtle comparisons to other men. No late-night phone calls taken in another room. The dog adjusted within a week. A few months after the paperwork finalized, Laura sent one last email. Not hostile. Not defensive. She said she underestimated how serious I was about boundaries. She wrote that she thought I would cool down and reconsider once the initial shock passed. She believed my standards were negotiable under pressure. I did not respond. People have asked whether I regret not trying harder to repair it. The honest answer is no. Repair requires mutual recognition of damage. She never acknowledged harm. She acknowledged inconvenience. There is a difference. Looking back, the affair itself was not the most revealing part. It was her expectation that I would accept it as a manageable complication, that I would absorb it the way I absorb work stress or construction delays. But relationships are not infrastructure projects. You cannot reinforce a foundation while someone is actively drilling into it. I did not get even in some dramatic way. I did not expose her publicly or sabotage her career. I removed access. I blocked contact. I filed paperwork. For me, that was even. Not revenge. Just consequences.